Sit. What's up? I have not done this in a while. I've been missing this whole contraption get up thing, and yeah, a lot of shit's been going on. So many new things. I might actually make a video on all the new shit that's been going on. But for right now, I wanted to talk about today's podcast. I know what it's like to be in a car accident. And this dude was in a pretty serious one to where he had brain trauma. And if you know anything about TBIs, they are not fun. It stands for traumatic brain injury. And with that, we talk about how we had to rebuild our lives and different things that we've had to do to be able to get through things. There was a couple times to where our conversation definitely went off track. That was my fault. Like I said, a lot has been going on, and I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't stressful. So, with all that being said, today's podcast is with a trauma therapist of all people. And no, it's not mine. Probably should be, but no, it's not. This dude, really cool. We were able to kind of connect on the idea that the Midwest is a little bit different than the rest of the world. Nobody really understands it except for us. So right now it's February, and it looks like this out here. But at the same time, tomorrow, this whole thing could be covered in snow. So you never really know what you're gonna get around here. But he has, since his car accident, he's been able to rebuild his life and be of some help to a lot of people. You see, he's not just trying to help himself. The great thing about this dude is that his entire job, the whole thing, is to fix you. You. The person watching this, the person that needs help. That's this guy. Hit him up. All his information's down below. And if you can't talk with him, find somebody, because the fucking world is crazy. So with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'm gonna get back to the dog. He's over there. Don't worry about him. He's doing his thing. But what I need from you before the episode starts is to subscribe. Just click the button. Just do it for me. You get everything from vlogging to podcasts, randomness. Who knows? Hit the like button and share this with somebody else who you think could use some help. Because in today's day and age, all of us could use a little mental break. And hanging out with one of these guys and then having a conversation with a therapist, sometimes that's all you really need. So that's gonna be it for today, guys. I appreciate you, I love you, and subscribe. Enjoy the episode.
I am a fighter of evil. I do it for my people, I do it for the love. I am a fighter, I fight off the dark side. Dig through the landslide to find your love, oh yeah.
And hit record, and yeah, just like that, we are good to go, man. So Daniel, I first wanted to thank you for taking some time out of your day to sit down with me and go through your story. Your story's extra interesting to me because you work with people that have gone through trauma, and that's currently something that I'm actively doing. Is going through trauma therapy for the past couple of years. You've been in a very significant car accident. And June of 22, I was in a very serious car accident. So there was quite a few parallels, and I really wanted to see kind of the inner workings of everything. So let's just dive right into this and kind of see where it takes us. And if we can't just start with your childhood, kind of
Yeah.
where you grew up with. I believe Wisconsin.
hmm
And yeah, just kind of start there. What were your parents like? What did they do? And what was your childhood like?
Yeah. So childhood, youngest of four kids, rural Wisconsin. So grew up, parents, my dad worked two jobs on a farm and then a dealership for ice implement or for John Deere tractors. So, and then mom just worked worked at customer service and bank jobs in the city that we grew up in. So, it's pretty chill, but grew up, you know, small classroom sizes, spent a lot of time outdoors, fishing,
Yeah.
hunting, I mean, kind of the Midwest thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely sounds like the normal Midwest upbringing.
yeah.
So, what was your relationship like with your parents growing up? Were you a very close knit family, and do you have siblings or only child?
Yeah. Yeah, so we were pretty close knit. Um my my closest sibling's 10 years older than me, so that other than age, we were close, right?
Mhm.
I mean, my sisters essentially raised me when my parents were busy, doing other stuff, working and things like that. But I mean, we still talk to this day, a lot. We're still pretty tight. My father passed away in April of 2022, so he's no longer in the picture. But
Sorry to hear
um,
about that.
yeah, it's been definitely an unexpected bump, but
Yeah.
it's something that happens in this world. So, um, having to work through those pieces with grief and loss. But uh, yeah, we still talk to my family almost, every few weeks. I mean, now we live in Colorado, so all of our family's still in Wisconsin.
Sure.
So, FaceTime
Home of
and
the
stuff like that is
cheesesteaks.
like, right, right.
You guys love Culver's in Wisconsin, man. It's like a
Yeah, and then
staple out
and
there.
they opened one up out here a few years ago, so it's a little touch of home.
Oh,
It's
really nice.
yeah. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, it's been fun, this year Packers made it pretty far for having a young team and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I live in Ann Arbor, so I think 20 minutes, from the Lions Stadium from Ford Field.
hmm
And it seems like, my whole life I've been hearing, everybody's a Lions fan until Thanksgiving comes around. They screw it up and, the Lions. And now the entire state just out of nowhere seems to be Lions fans and everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. And so it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens.
Well, well,
What's
it's
that?
nice. It's nice to see them make it that far too.
Yeah, yeah, after like 30 years or something like that. I'm not a huge football guy. I
Yeah.
grew up playing hockey. So
Okay.
that was kind of my Midwest sport. But
Yep.
um yeah, so during your childhood, did you play sports? Were you active? Did you do play, drama, music? Kind of what were your activities growing up?
Yeah, I mean, started basketball, I mean, as young as you can, and then played through my sophomore year of high school, but always very active, physically fit. Did cross country too, first year of high school. That was a pretty cool experience. And then fitness is just kind of something that from that early of an age is just something that kind of gets ingrained in you.
Hmm.
And I think there's also some parts of like right now, just kind of the phase of life that we're in with fam starting a family and running a private practice and kind of getting everything up on the getting up getting everything moving and momentum built up. And physical fitness has kind of taken a little bit of a back burner, which has been hard. But
Sure.
I know that in time things will shift and that those pieces can come back in. So I'm
Sure.
just kind of patiently waiting for that. But but overall, I mean, again, kind of what I said, grew up, I think every day, during the summer was outside in some capacity, right? Paintballing, hunting,
Hmm.
fishing, exploring nature, or then even helping out on the farms and stuff like that, baling hay. So driving tractors, whatever we needed.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like when you grow up in that environment, you kind of learn the value of discipline at a very young age, which
Mhm.
can then be an asset later in life to kind of help you overcome some trauma, which I'm
Yeah,
sure we're going to get into the next couple minutes. So it
yeah.
kind of sounds like you led the perfect Midwest childhood, man. I mean, like, nothing too crazy. It's just like the normal Wisconsin childhood of
Hmm.
sports and being outside, and you come home when the street light comes on and
Hmm.
things of that nature. And out of nowhere, it seems like your life kind of took a huge turn.
Yeah.
Uh, so let's just kind of start walking through that and see exactly what happened, because you were involved in a very serious motor accident, I believe, correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so what happened? Let's kind of just like walk through the whole
Sure.
scenario of that day. And
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
let's
so
hear
actually the accident happened with my um like where I grew up, my neighbor that I actually grew up with. So one, there was a time he was like, take that day off of work. We're gonna go up to um a different area of Wisconsin, visit some of my family, and just hang out up there. And the whole day we were just swimming. I mean, the accident itself happened at like 5:12, 5:13 p.m. So, pretty early in the day, in the evening or late afternoon. But the whole day before that, we were playing mini golf, we were swimming, we were eating cherries from the trees. It was just like a typical like chill summer day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, it was pretty lighthearted. And then actually, we left early because I had to get home to Skype with one of my other buddies who lives on a different part of the world that I met during high school. So we actually left early and then got into the car accident and never made it to the call.
Oh man.
It was just kind of what the day looked like leading up to it. But we were, from what I remember, we were only maybe 3 to 5 miles away from my buddy's house, or maybe a little bit more than that, 7. Um, we were actually slowing down for a stop sign, and something fell, or I think it was my key, my house key that fell, and I couldn't find it because it like slid underneath like this little piece of the dashboard. And my buddy just is like, "Oh, just take that panel off and it's right there." And then that was the last thing I remember, was seeing all the different like circuit colored wires, blue, red,
Yeah.
yellow, and then woke up 3 days later in the hospital. So
Oh
I don't
Jesus.
remember anything after that point. Like, your brain kind of
Yeah.
protects you from some of those pieces in terms of dissociation. So, um, yeah, I mean, from what he told me, because I lost consciousness at that, when we started
And how old are
rolling.
you at this point?
So I was 17, so I was going
Yeah.
into my senior year of high school.
Yep.
Uh, so July 2009, going in that summer between junior and senior year. But yeah, from what I'm told, because obviously I don't remember it, but we rolled 2 or 3 times on the cement and then flipped into like one of those kind of like country ditches and then into the field, that was off the road. But it was just a one car rollover. There was no other cars involved, thank goodness.
Mhm.
But essentially, I mean, at least in Wisconsin, you have small shoulders sometimes, and the two right wheels went off, and we were in kind of it was kind of like one of those. It wasn't, I don't even think they don't make them anymore, but it was something similar to like a Honda CRV or something like that, like
Okay.
where,
Yeah. Yeah.
where it's like top heavier,
Yep.
right? Um, and both both wheels on the right side went off the road. Driver corrected. We were in the oncoming lane, corrected again, and then the tires just gripped and we flipped. So, but yeah, I don't remember anything after those wires. That's all what I was told, right? And from from that point on, I was unconscious. The driver was not. He was fortunately able to find a cell phone, called EMS, called 911, and then also called his mom, who's a nurse, because we were in a very rural area, so they were going to take me to a smaller hospital. But
Hmm.
his mom was like, hey, if he has a head injury or something like that, like he's going to be admitted and they have to be transferred. Just take him directly to a higher trauma hospital in the Green Bay area. So that's what they did and probably saved my life. So uh, yeah,
Thank God she was around.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's when I had
Yep.
my car accident, so I was actually just driving home from work on my way to physical therapy, and
Hmm.
a woman came out of like a side country road, and there were trees basically up to the line. So you couldn't really
Hmm.
see what was coming, and she had a stop sign, blew the stop sign and ran into me doing like we were both going, what the speed limit was 55, so realistically we're doing about 60, and
Yeah.
just T-boned me, flipped the car, and then ended up in a
Flipped your
ditch.
car or her car?
My car, yeah. So
Okay.
my car was the one that had flipped and ended up in a ditch. And it just seems like when those things happen, it's split second, but at the same
Yeah.
time, everything slows down. And
Hmm.
it's this really, really weird. I don't know. It's not a fun time for anybody.
Yeah.
But I do remember trying to climb out of my car, and because
Hmm.
all the windows had shattered, and I tried to climb out through the door, and all I could hear was this woman saying, "I'm a nurse, what's going on?" And it just seems like nurses show up when you need them, and they're like the backbone of the medical community. Like,
Yeah.
they're the warriors, so it was like as soon as I
Right.
heard that there was a nurse by, I was like, oh, thank God. At least someone's here to help out. So that's amazing that
Yeah.
you had her, as an asset to
Oh
help
yeah.
out. So you get
Yeah. I mean,
you get
I
taken
mean,
to this hospital. Oh, go ahead.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was unconscious, so they had to use the jaws of life to take me out just from the damage. Like there was no way
Oh, wow.
the doors were gonna creak open. But yeah, I mean how it worked out with my buddy not losing consciousness, right? Finding our phones or one of the phones and then being able to call, right? I mean, it's just wild how that stuff kind of led together and
Yeah.
then him connecting with his mom who just happened to be a nurse, right? And yeah, I mean you can't like I don't know how some things work in life. Like it's like you can't even make that stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just wild.
So when
So
you get to the hospital, are you coherent at this point, or are you
no,
still knocked out?
they put me in a coma for 3 days. So I came home, or I didn't come home. I came to in the ICU. And it was this really weird sensation that I had thought. So I'd never traveled internationally before. And I don't know like how your brain works after a traumatic brain injury. It's just weird, but I thought I had gone through like the time changes and I was in Europe. I think I felt like I was in France or something. I was like, what? Like what happened? But at the same time, I asked how my buddy was who was in the accident because I knew something had happened. So my brain was just like, I mean,
Yeah.
I can't even explain how the brain works on that level, right? But yeah, I got to the hospital. My sister at the time only lived, 10 minutes away and was the first one there. And essentially, because the hospital they took me to was like, I mean, if whether you have insurance or not, like they'll stabilize you at the hospital and then,
Mhm.
move you to a hospital that, is for people who do not have insurance or whatever. But luckily we did. And so she was like, yeah, he has he has insurance and stuff. And then they did the surgery and they admitted me after or during, I don't know.
What type
But
of surgeries you have to have?
yeah, so it's called a craniotomy. They essentially had to remove part of my skull right here to stop the bleeding in my left temporal lobe. Um, you know, but from the accident, I had a what was it collapsed left lung, fractured skull, and I messed up my hearing in my left ear too. And then because of the bleed, I had a stroke in my left prefrontal cortex or my front prelobe, my left prefrontal lobe. There we go. So yeah.
Wow. So you
Mhm.
really got banged up in that car, man.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. I mean, they told my parents, they're like, if he makes it through the night, like that'll tell us a lot about his recovery. But the next, 24, 48, 72 hours. Like if he makes it, we'll see a lot probably.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I can't imagine being your parents and being in that situation. I
yeah.
like right now, my fiance and I, we don't have kids, planning to, but I can't imagine being in that position, seeing your child in the hospital in a coma. Um, yeah, that just sounds like hell on earth. But I believe I listened to one of the other podcasts you were on, and please forgive me if I'm just butchering this, but you were in and out of coma for a few days. Is that correct? And how does
Yeah.
that work? If that's okay, yeah. How
Yeah.
does that work?
I mean, it has to do with the anesthesiologist, I'm assuming. But so they kept me in a coma for 3 days. And during those 3 days, my family was not allowed to touch me because of the sensations could like just overwhelm my body with everything that I was going through, right? I mean, my head was
Yeah.
swollen, you know.
Well, I
Oh,
guess yeah, I was asking more of like why? Why did they choose to
oh,
keep doing the yeah, sorry, I
so
misspoke.
so no worries. So then after the 3 day mark, they would start taking me out during the day and putting me back in so I could really get some rest
Hmm.
and just kind of like not even well, I mean, obviously you're sleeping, but you're also just like not aware of anything, right? Like when you're sleeping, if you hear something, you can wake up, right? Like
Yeah.
your body's just kind of in a more dormant state. So my understanding is that they did that just to allow me a little bit more, I guess, like internal peace so I could heal, right?
Yeah.
And not like hear all these monitors going, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you were in like a medically induced coma for
Yes.
3 4 days.
Yeah, so 3 days in 24/7, and then for the next few days I would be put in at night and then taken out during the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That does not sound like fun. So I got a
Mhm.
couple questions and then
Yeah.
we'll jump back into this part. Up to
Go
this
for it.
point, you're a 17-year-old kid from Wisconsin, great family, friends, everything's going, like how you'd prefer it to go. This happens. But up to this point, do you have like large aspirations or like larger goals? And like, did you have something that you were actively trying to accomplish, or were you just a 17-year-old trying to figure it out like most of us?
I think I was a 17-year-old trying to figure it out. I didn't really
Okay.
I didn't really know like what the hell I was gonna do with my life, right? I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I'm either gonna go to school for some like, default business degree or college for a default business degree or join the military, right? And then after this, so it wasn't until I got moved to out of the ICU and then into the inpatient rehab, I was like, I think I'm gonna land somewhere here in this helping profession, right? I don't know where, but somewhere. And then fast forward to I was already home, and then I had a conversation with my sister, who's also a social worker in Wisconsin, and she was like, "Check this profession out," right?
Hmm.
So, but that's how I got into this. That's how I, and then there was a volunteer opportunity that I really enjoyed, and um, from there it was like, okay, cool, like let's get a bachelor's in social work, and then I figured out I can't really do like one-on-one therapy, right? Can't really work in hospital settings without that master's. So then that's what led me to the master's
Hmm.
in social work. So
Yeah, that's a long road, man. But
yeah,
all
it
right,
is.
yes. So let's get back to you to your accident. And
Yep.
so they're getting you in and out of coma. And
Hmm.
what does your recovery process look like? 'Cause you've spoken about like speech therapy, occupational therapy.
Hmm.
I gotta imagine there's some physical therapy in there.
Oh yeah.
Not to mention, like just the act of like talk therapy and trying to
Hmm.
figure out and comprehend what even happened.
Yep.
So what does that look like for you, like for the first 6 months or year, kind of whatever that was?
Yeah. How granular do you want me to go?
As far as you want to go, man.
I
We can
mean,
dive into it.
so I'm fairly certain this happened during the ICU when I was in the ICU for 10 days, but the doctors were like, we don't think you're probably going to graduate with your high school cohort that you started with.
Hmm.
I mean, come on the heels of a TBI, this is July, right? School starts end of August, early September.
Yeah.
And I told them I would, and I did. And that was I mean, we'll get into like that, like, the grit and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That'll
I
that'll
just
be
had
another.
20 questions
Right,
just popped up.
right,
So yeah,
right. I don't know if I was just more that defiant adolescent at that point, saying like, you can't tell me what to
right.
do, or if I was like, no, like try me, right? Like
Yeah,
challenge
yeah,
accepted. Um, but then it was ICU. So when I was in the ICU at like in the comas, they were like, we don't know if he's gonna have to relearn how to talk, like relearn how to walk, all these different pieces, right? Just the temporal lobe is where a lot of language areas of your brain are kept, right? Memories,
yeah.
stuff like that. So um moving into that, they were just like, we'll see what happens, right? And it's funny. Today is the 27th, and we're doing this podcast. And I was reading a book on Auschwitz, the concentration camp in Poland.
Okay,
And
yeah.
today is also uh is it the I forget the actual title, but it's like World International like Holocaust Awareness Day or something that we're doing this
Oh my
podcast.
God. I did
So
not know that.
I'm just like I just like yeah. So anyway, I was reading this book before the accident, and then I asked my speech or I asked the team, I was like, "Can I read while I'm in the ICU?" And they like forced me to read out loud because they're like, "We don't even know if you're actually reading at this point." But like,
Yeah,
so I had to like read a paragraph to them. But like, mind you, I just had brain surgery, so they cut, and this will come in later too, but they cut the muscle to get to the brain or to get to
okay.
the skull, right? To get to the brain. So everything on this side of my face had like paralysis. So everything pulled over this way, right? So like everything. I mean, like I couldn't shut my left eye. They had to put like gel in my eye when I was sleeping. So like if I tried to, because they didn't want my eye to dry out, right? But
Yeah,
like everything, like I forget what this, it starts with like a T, I think, but like this part like all pulled over, right? So so then they're like, okay, we want you to read, but like I can only move like this side of my mouth pretty much.
oh my
So they
God.
but so they forced me, they're like, we want to make sure you can actually read.
So are you like there cognitively? Like, would you say like you're a
In the
hundred
hospital,
percent? Yeah, in the
I wouldn't
hospital.
say 100%.
Okay,
I was pretty doped up on pain meds and
sure.
but like I'm also like, well, what am I doing like for 8 hours a day? They have me awake. I'm just like sitting here with feeding tubes, like
Yeah,
can't really do too much. So then it got to a point where they pulled the feeding tubes out, and then I walked around the nursing station in the ICU, and I was holding onto a wheelchair. And then some of your listeners, and I don't know if you know, but like what a gait belt is. Are you familiar with that? It's like a thick like belt that goes right above your hips, so like healthcare professionals, if you're walking, can hold
yes.
onto it so that
Yep.
they can like let you down
Yes.
slowly
Yep.
if you fall. So I had that on, and then I think I had two or three nurses around me, and I walked around the nursing station in the ICU. So going from like a highly functioning like 17 independent, right, to like
Yeah.
can only walk with a wheelchair with three nurses around me, right? Like, and then the identity shifts and like holy crap, right?
Yeah.
Then fast forward 10 days, I'm out of the ICU in inpatient rehab, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a shower, but I can't stand. So I have to shower with like a nurse helping me, right? And you're just like, shit, like
Yeah.
I'm pretty messed up right now,
Yeah.
right?
Those are humbling experiences,
Oh yeah,
to say the least.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think like, I mean humility just in general, whether it's traumatic brain injury recovery or like you looking at like harm reduction or abstinence, right, from substances or just mental health recovery, right? I mean, talk about a humbling experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how long are you in the hospital altogether for before you're
Um,
allowed to leave home?
I think it was like 17 or 18 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so 10 days ICU, seven inpatient rehab. But like I don't know, and I say 17 to 18 because I don't know if like that
Sure.
night I was, had the surgery and admitted if that counts or not.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. So the
so.
driver, did he just
Mhm.
walk away pretty much unscratched, or did he have
Mm,
injuries or anything? Or
yeah, so he had a concussion, he messed up his shoulder. Um after I was home, well, I mean, he came to visit him and his family. I mean, there are neighbors in Wisconsin, right?
Mhm.
So like they came to visit me when I was in the hospital already. Um because it was genuinely an accident. Like it wasn't like, there was no
Yeah.
like, you know, drunk driving or reckless driving. Like we were slowing down for a stop sign and it was just like, oh, took the eyes off the road, right?
Mhm.
Um, so then him and I actually started going on walks together when I'm at home, like on our country roads. And then we start running. And then he was the first person I started working out with. And he was the only person outside my family I would actually trust to drive me because they took my driver's license for a few months to make sure I wasn't having seizures and stuff like that.
That's a
So
little weird. The guy that caused the accident is the only one that you trust to
yeah,
drive you.
yeah,
It's
right.
a little different, but all right.
But it's also like without him calling, 911,
Yeah.
his
So it's kind of
mom.
like a trauma bond almost.
Yeah, for sure. And for him too, because he was the one that like saw me just in the passenger seat with my head keeled over, just bleeding out of my head.
Yeah,
So, he has those images in his head, right?
sure.
And so, I mean, was he affected medically from like the concussion and like the shoulder injury? Yes. Mentally, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So see how I can kind of bring this up. So I'm very curious as to, like, I know we've spoken about like the physical therapies and the things of that like those modalities that you use to try to get yourself back into like functioning society type thing. But there's also the other part that a lot of people don't talk about, and something that I've experienced is kind of after my accident, I was questioning a lot of things.
hmm.
At that point, I was actually, so I moved out to Ann Arbor like May 15th of 2018 to go to rehab for drugs and alcohol.
Okay.
Mainly just a ton of like childhood trauma and everything that had
Sure.
kind of encompassed that. That was my escape. And it was a goal of mine to become a dietitian. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to finish my bachelor's degree. I tried a couple times and I just kept dropping out or getting kicked out for, partying and whatever.
Yeah.
So I go back and I'm in school doing my undergrad. My car accident happens, and 2 weeks later, I'm walking into class on crutches with a back brace, and
Hmm.
everybody's staring at you. And all of my friends know me as like the bigger gym guy. Like I was the one to push everybody and like more muscle than most people in the gym, and that was my
Hmm.
identity, as I was just
Hmm.
go getter, like I'm jacked, we're doing this, I'm going to change the world type thing. The car accident happened and life stopped. It
Yeah.
seemed like everything came
Sure.
to a halting stop, all the way up to the point to where I questioned everything, to where I'm getting accepted to law school now. So my
Rock on.
trajectory just completely
Hmm.
changed because of everything. How do you go through that at 17? Because it happened to me
Yeah.
when I was 37, so
Yeah.
that's when I had my massive accident. I can't imagine what it's like at 17. You haven't
Hmm.
even figured shit out yet. You're
Hmm.
barely like a human. I mean, you're a human, but like, like you're still figuring life out. And then to have your identity stripped away from you, what's
Hmm.
it like to walk back into school? Like when you finally do get to go back, everyone's staring at you.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Everybody wants to talk about it and everything. And how do you get out of your head and continue and move on and kind of do that with strength and power instead of acting as like a victim? Because you do not seem to come off as that type of person, as
Hmm.
woe is me, like take care of me, I'm hurt type guy. Like
Yeah.
what did you have to go through during that time to get through that period of your
I
life?
mean, there's a lot in there. We might have to have another podcast episode. Um, so yeah, I mean, your accident much different than mine in terms of age, right? But like those identity pieces start coming up even as a 17-year-old around like, my is going into senior year of high school. Like you're supposed to have fun, right? You're
Hmm.
supposed to like, go to bonfires on Friday nights or
Yep, exactly.
Saturday nights and find yourself, whatever that means. I couldn't do that. So with TBIs, one of the hallmarks with them are like large levels of fatigue. So going from, again, 17-year-old, like highly functioning, could, stay up pretty much all night, get 2 hours of sleep and go to school the next day, right? Like whatever it
Right.
was. I went from, after that accident, I was sleeping anywhere from 14 to 16 hours a day.
Wow.
Because I needed, like, I was just like so exhausted from just, maybe it was the brain healing, just, the body adjusting to everything. But one of the, I wasn't able to go to those bonfires, right? Those
Mhm.
basketball games that happened at 7 or 8 at night, I was usually already asleep.
Yeah.
So I missed a lot of that social pieces. And there's a lot of grief and loss that follows some of those, big transitions in life. And I don't just mean like TBIs, but death
Mhm.
of a loved one, right? Maybe it's a car accident that really rocks your life. Maybe it's a, combat deployment or something like that, right?
Sure.
Whatever it is, divorce. And you start sitting in some of that grief and loss, and at some point, I mean, you can choose to run from it. I mean, there's always drugs, alcohol, right? Like,
Yep.
I mean, usually short term that stuff works, but long term it's not going to work,
Yeah.
and or derail it even further. So, and it wasn't how I was raised to go to those things. So, pretty much had to sit in it because I was either sleeping or I couldn't go to the gym and work out. So there's a lot of almost like forced acceptance at one point, and then until you can actually like say like I can't like white knuckle this shit anymore. Like I just need to like, and surrender is not the right word, but almost like humbly hold it, right? Or hold it humbly, however you want to phrase
Sure.
it, because that stuff's going to eat you up on the inside.
Yeah.
And you can like fight it. There's a, what is it? I'm trying to draw an analogy here, but in one of the Batman movies, I think it was the Dark Knight movie, like the Joker was like, I think it was Heath Ledger. It was talking to Batman about like this is where an unstoppable force meet, or this is what it's like when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, right?
Yeah.
Like what happens, right? And and I think there's a part of it where it's like they just both coexist, right?
Hmm.
So there was a piece where it was like, yeah, I want to do these things, and I also know that I won't be able to do anything in the future that is anything of meaning in my life if I don't focus on where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So
Even
you
though I
just,
even though it's really hard to like hear your friends talking about what they did, right? Over
yeah.
the week, right?
So you pretty much just had to put your head down and start grinding just to get through the basic part of high school, let alone the social
Sure.
aspect of it.
100%. I mean, luckily I had enough credits and we operated on a block system. Are you familiar with those? Like where
Huh.
we had 4 classes a day. So
Okay.
we alternated classes every other day. And so the first semester of my senior year, I just went to school half days and I would come home, take usually an hour to 2 hour nap afterwards. And then second semester I could go for a full day and I would do a half day. And I still had enough credit, or I still had enough credits to graduate with my class, right?
So
So,
you did it.
oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but
Hell
again,
yeah.
I think some of that like work ethic that, your parents instill in you. I mean, I think I did my first 12-hour day on a farm when I was in sixth grade.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's not like you can roll over. And I think you mentioned like that woe is me. And it's like, yeah, like you've been through a lot and nobody else is gonna do this healing but you.
Yeah.
They can tell you to do it, right? But unless you want it, right? I
Is
mean,
it is it weird for me to say that going through a traumatic experience can almost be a superpower and it
no.
kind of gives you an extra gear, like a little higher octane fuel to push past things? Would you say that's accurate in your case?
I would say yes and no. I don't know if it gives higher octane fuel, and what I mean by that is I think sometimes trauma or like large levels of adversity, at least from what I've seen in terms of my clinical work, could really highlight our values, which then in turn fuel, right, where our drive comes from, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know if the trauma is the high octane piece, right? But I think that trauma or that adversity highlights what is crucial. And when we can stay in those pieces that are crucial in our lives, family, like whatever else it is, fitness, right? Caring for others, you know, then those things fuel us, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you can just like keep going even when shit gets hard,
Yeah. So I
right?
can I can definitely tell by the way you speak, um, that like you can tell the line of work you do. Um, I can tell you speak to a lot of people, trauma related,
Mhm.
and so I might as well just kind of like segue straight into kind of how you got into your career.
Yeah.
So you graduate high school,
Hmm.
and at this point, you know you want to be helping people somehow.
Hmm.
You're not 100% sure how. Are you just blindly like applying to colleges, hoping to figure it out while you're there, or when do you kind of start to get on track of this is kind of what I'm meant to do?
Yeah. So again, it's going to come back to that conversation I had with my sister, right? And the reason I had that conversation with my sister is because when I got home on the 17th or 18th day after the accident, I was not allowed to be alone because they weren't sure that seizures were going to show up. So
Mhm.
my sister, the one that's a social worker, had to adjust her college schedule because both my parents are working. And essentially, while raising one kid, would stay at home with me, do college work, and make sure that her kid was safe and taken care of, and me. So
You,
I wasn't having the seizures, right?
you have
So
an
then,
amazing sister.
well, not only that, but I also have, and I think that that's the other part of recovery too, is having a support network.
Yeah.
We don't heal by ourselves. We heal in community with others.
Hmm.
And think so many people also just like I can do this on my own, and that's very, I mean, there are pieces where you do need to do it on your own, right? But there's also pieces where it's okay to say, like, I need help. I need some guidance here. How should
Yeah.
I navigate this situation, right? And that's okay.
Yeah. So did you go into your freshman year with this conversation kind of loaded, knowing that that was your angle, or was it a couple years into it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I already knew going into college or my freshman year that it was gonna end up being in social work, but I didn't know when exactly, just because college classes are much different than high school in terms of
Mhm.
workload, right? And then there's also the piece of like, how is my brain going to respond to that increased workload? So I actually took like bare minimum classes for most of my college years. So it took me 4.5 years to finish my undergrad versus just, a straight four or something like
Right.
that. But so in the social work programs, you have to apply to and be accepted into. It's
Yep.
not like, oh, I just declare this, go. Here are the classes. So, there was some question on when do I apply, right? When am I in a position where I can manage classroom as well as internship related to social work curriculum, right? And then also try to have a job while I'm an undergrad. So, but I think, you just need to keep pushing on some level.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not going to passively happen.
Yeah. If only that were the case, life would be so much simpler, but then we wouldn't appreciate anything.
Right.
The crazy thing is to me is so I have two very close friends who are in the therapy space.
Hmm.
One specializes in like alcohol in abuse, that type of thing, and the other one specializes in family.
Hmm.
And I know them on like a very close level, and I know they've both gone through a lot of shit. And so it almost seems like, from my experience, I went through like after rehab, doing the 12-step programs, and you start to hear other people's stories, and it kind of seems like the therapists that I know have gone through trauma to be
Hmm.
able to help others through it, which I know it's not a requirement, but do you feel like it may aid you in your practice at all in kind of understanding where people are at?
I mean, I'm biased, so I'm gonna say yes.
Sure.
I think it does. I mean, do I know some other good therapists that haven't really went through shit? Yes, I do. I mean, that's part of the reason that there are some of these therapy modalities are so rigorously tested, right? Is like, can they be delivered in a systematic way to create change in people's lives?
Hmm.
Do I think it adds to like an empathetic connection? Yeah, I think it does. I don't think, you know, learning about learning about mental illnesses or trauma or learning about TBIs, those are one pieces of the pie, but also having some lived experience too. It kind of gives you a little bit more, street cred, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what it's like to need to take a nap in the middle of the day, or not just feel like somebody just took your head and shook it and like your brain isn't connected to your skull anymore, right? And it's just like that sheer internal shearing inside your head is just so, I mean, I think there are very few things in the world that can create those types of sensations. So
Hmm.
having some of that awareness, yeah, I mean, I think you can connect on some level that other
Yeah.
people can't, but can you still be
Yeah.
effective? I think you can be too.
When I was in rehab, they gave us like primaries, which was like
Hmm.
the like basically our counselor. And so I was in this house with, I believe we had like 18 beds or something like that. And so my primary, in speaking to her, it was very obvious she had never spent a day in the streets, or like
Hmm.
never closed down a bar at 2 a.m. Like it was overly obvious, and it pushed me away. It made
Hmm.
me discredit almost everything she said, because I would just be like, you only know this theoretically. Like, you don't know this in practice. You've never been there, like,
Hmm.
so you're kind of just regurgitating somebody else's information, and it sucked, because I'm sure she could have been a valuable asset. I just wasn't in a place to be able to accept it, and so
Yeah.
it pushed away. So I've always been curious about kind of everybody's perspective on that. Um, yeah. So I
Well,
want to ask one. Oh yeah, go ahead.
we give off those vibes, right? How we, just the title of your podcast, right? A fighter story has some sort of underlying meaning already, right?
Yeah, yeah,
How I write my blogs, how I do my podcast interviews is how I also approach therapy. It's like I'm gonna support you, but I'm also gonna challenge you,
yeah,
right? Because nobody's gonna do this for you, and I'm just like a facilitator here.
yeah. And that's the best type of relationship to have too. I do not like having people around me that are comfortable and that
Mhm.
will co-sign my bullshit. I want
Mhm.
people to tell me when I'm, fucking up, when I need to do something different, when I need to stop. And those are
Mhm.
those are the real friends. Those are the
Mhm.
people that I really value. And yeah, so this next question, and then I want to dive deep into therapy for a little bit and get some education, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, while you're going through undergrad for everybody is the same. It's like you're taking a bunch of classes, you don't even know why. Some
Hmm.
schools make you take classes that, like religion classes, but yet you're going to be a chemist, and it doesn't make sense. So undergrad is just a whirlwind for everybody. I'm more curious about how you got through that and grad school with a TBI, because I cannot imagine that, like, you were able to just pop back 100% cognitively, and you'll be able to just start spewing out answers and be able to
Yeah.
do things like that. So what did you have to do aside from just showing up and being a traditional student to be able to get through that time?
Mhm. So again, there's a lot of information in here. One, my first year of undergrad, I did not live on campus because I knew that I needed a calm environment to come back
Hmm.
to sleep, to do homework, to focus, right? To just have meals where I didn't need to think about like how they were being cooked, right? And just kind of be in that environment where you can regulate your nervous system versus living on campus can be pretty chaotic at times. The other part too was leaning heavily into working out. right? So getting back to not only like, because when I was in the hospital, because of the feeding tube and stuff, right? Like your calorie intake drops
Yeah.
drastically.
Oh yeah.
So I think I lost like 20 pounds just within a matter of 10 days.
Wow.
Um, and then also then the muscle atrophy that just happens naturally because I wasn't able to work out for a number of months
Hmm.
after. Um, and then the rebuild of starting to walk with my buddy, right? And then starting to run and then starting to work out. So those pieces in terms of like feeding and building self-confidence again, self-esteem, right? Just like being able to see some progress on like a physical level in the mirror is one
Hmm.
part. And then also being able to say like, okay, I'm just gonna go up to the university for these 2 classes and then come home and then I can take a nap and I can just take care of myself and then do homework and then and just kind of structure things, right? That was one of the big things was I still needed structure. I wasn't able to just self-structure.
Okay.
Fast forward to sophomore year, I moved up to campus. I also had some really cool roommates that were pretty understanding of, hey, I had a TBI a few years ago. I need to relax. I need things to be calm. And then, you start kind of testing the waters. Can you stay up a little bit later to hang out with friends and play Mario Kart, right? And,
Mhm.
whatever it was. And then it just sort of naturally kind of fell into place. But I will say that I enjoy structuring my time even to this day. And maybe that's because I like to like I I don't know when there's no structure, I just waste time. Or maybe because it's like I like to get things done and or it's both. But then in sophomore year, I was able to pick up 2 jobs in terms and then also go to school with an internship. So I also had time where I was like, I just need to do this homework because that's when it needs to be done, right? I can't just
Yeah.
piss this or procrastinate, right? So that's part of kind of how I moved through undergrad. Then I took a year and a half off-ish because I finished my undergrad at Boise State in Idaho.
Okay.
And then I worked out there for what was it, maybe a year and a half? Yeah. Um, a little over a year and a half with children that are in special education rooms that have a lot of intellectual developmental challenges. And then I applied to grad school and came here. So I didn't work during grad school just because I figured the workload was going to be more intense, and I also had I think it was 24-ish or 20-hour a week internship on top of it. So again, structuring time came in handy, working out came in handy,
Hmm.
biking to and from the university on days where it wasn't snowing or raining, those pieces of just kind of getting the body moving, right? Expending extra energy.
Just
So
sounds like you had to have a lot of discipline
mhm,
to choose the hard route instead of the easy route for almost everything you do.
mhm.
Yeah. I like
But
that.
I mean, that's also when you mention the Midwest, that's usually what shows up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
When you
mean,
go through our winters, you'll
mhm.
learn to get through some shit. Um,
Yes.
all right, so yeah, I really want to dive into some therapy education a little bit. Not so
Yeah.
much for you to be a professor or anything, but just to get perspective.
Sure.
Um, I was in therapy when I was like 8, and I have no
Mhm.
idea why. I came from a very violent background, so I understand the need for it. I don't
Yeah.
remember it.
Okay.
As I grew older, I it almost seemed as if like talk therapy, CBT or DBT, things of those natures were more for the affluent community, for people that had money, that could afford these things, and that had not real problems. Like that was my
Mhm.
perspective, kind of growing up, um,
Mhm.
until I got to my 30s, realistically, and then like after rehab, and kind of wanted to figure out my own shit. Um, But I was shocked to find out that you work in jails and
Mm.
like inpatient things or inpatient clinics. and you work with like trauma survivors with psychosis, mood disorders, uh, all sorts of areas, to
Yeah.
where it, especially like jails and prisons and things like that, that's the opposite of an affluent community.
Mm.
So I guess, when did it become so available? And do you find that there's a difference in working with the two classes? Because you'll go from a jail, to a private therapy session. Is
Mm.
is there a significant difference kind of in those conversations, or is the basis of kind of what you're talking about all the same?
Yeah. So currently I work inpatient. I used to work in jails, so I just want to clarify that,
Okay.
right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I work in locked inpatient during the day, and then I run private practice stuff in the evenings and the weekends. But is there a difference? I think there's a difference in terms of symptom stability, where people in private practice are able to maintain jobs, maintain housing, maintain a certain quality of life, where other people, maybe they're in and out of jails, maybe they're in and out of psych hospitals,
Hmm.
struggle to maintain that stability, which then can impact, how they work with providers, how providers work with them, and just overall consistency of treatment.
Hmm.
So is there a difference? Yes. Can CBT be effective for both? Yes. People in inpatient and
Right.
or outpatient. Can acceptance and commitment therapy, DBT, can those still be impactful? Yes. Can you do EMDR in an inpatient setting for trauma? You can, if the person's going to be there long enough and their symptoms are stable enough. Can you do EMDR outpatient? Yes. Right.
Hmm.
So it just depends on the person, right? In their situation.
Yeah.
Typically, people at the hospital are also not there long enough to you go through a round of EMDR and work unpack. I mean, sometimes trauma work is, just doing an accident that somebody was in, right? Sometimes trauma work is, I grew up with an abusive mother or an abusive father,
Hmm.
or an uncle that took advantage of me, right? And some of those things take years to work through, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you don't want to open up that stuff in an inpatient setting or in a jail setting and then have the person leave and say, okay, good luck, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, on your website, you mentioned that there's three types of trauma: acute, chronic, and complex. And so
Mm.
acute would be like a single incident, like a car accident. Chronic would be repetition of like husband wife abuse, that type of thing. And then complex would just be a massive, barrage of things just continuously happening. Do you see, or do you find that one of those trumps the other in kind of like today's climate of what you're seeing more often being brought into the office setting?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I don't know if one trumps. They're all very important. And acute too is more like something happens and you're 30 days out. Like that's so for example, you can't diagnose PTSD within 30 days of a traumatic event because
Mhm.
after a traumatic event, naturally you should be a little dysregulated, right?
Sure, yeah.
So then after that acute phase, 30 days ish, then you can look at like if there's a PTSD piece associated. But I don't, all of them are very important and all are very important to treat. Um, I I can't say I mean, I can say what I work on in my private practice, but I don't really see one over the other. I
Okay.
see coming in with all sorts of things,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes people will come in for work on anxiety and then they're like, oh, by the way, like my family environment growing up was not the best. And it was pretty invalidating of my
Right.
experience, who I was as a person. And then we find out like, oh, that may be the bridge right there, right? That we need to target those pieces, not the
Mhm.
anxiety, because anxiety is a symptom of a larger issue.
Right. Sure.
Right. And that's why one of the reasons I love EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, because it really looks at, somebody's self-harming. Oh, like it's not just like stop the self-harm. It's like, where does that come from, right?
Yeah.
What influences those pieces of, maybe it's dissociation that they're self-harming to keep them in reality, right? Maybe it's because of a low self-worth or whatever it is, but like what are those situations that created those things to show up in the first place? And can we target those, and then self-harm will start to decrease, right?
Sure. So I gotta imagine when you were 17 in
Mhm.
Wisconsin, you never imagined yourself being a talk therapist, sitting in jails,
Mhm.
private settings, doing anything like that. And a few years have passed since you were 17. You've gone through quite a bit, and now you're an expert in your field. What would you how would you start to get somebody to go down the road of starting therapy, and
Mhm.
explaining the benefits? Just, I mean, look, we're around the same age, so both from
Mhm.
the Midwest. So it's like one of those things to where if you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. Like, get up, dust your knees off, keep going. It's raining, who cares? Finish the game. That
Mhm.
that type of that was kind of our era when we grew up,
Mhm.
and things have changed since then. But taking that into now, how do you kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm also trying to formulate this at the same time. I guess,
Okay.
yeah,
Um,
it's kind of like, how can you tell that person that's been told their entire life to, like, if you're gonna cry, I'll give you a reason to cry, and just shut up, stuff it in, especially as a man. Boys
mhm.
are told,
Yeah.
don't cry, don't do this, don't do that. And it seems like as a man, we need to cry sometimes
Mhm.
a lot.
Yeah.
We need to talk to each other about being open and vulnerable and honest and having these conversations. It's just we have this stigma of, I'm a man, I'm supposed to be strong. How do you get
Mhm.
past that? And what do you say to somebody to kind of get them into the door, at least for like one session, just to start?
Mhm. So typically people reach out to me for therapy, right? So
Sure.
they
Yeah.
know something's going on. Or maybe they're even reaching out because they're like, their partner is like, you need to go see a therapist, right? And my first few sessions with people aren't like, tell me from a 30,000 foot view what's happened in your life, but let's not get granular right now. Let's just,
Mhm.
what do you see in me? What do I see in you? Right? Do you feel safe in this setting to even share some of that stuff? I'm not going to pry it out of you. Like, if you want to sit here and not say anything, I'll, gladly charge you. But does
Sure.
it does it bring me a lot of joy to like not do the work? No.
Yeah.
So one of the ways around that, especially with EMDR therapy too, is looking at, and then there's also internal family systems. I'm not trained in that, but I'm aware of it. Are looking at parts of self, and when we're told, just to kind of suck it up, or like, don't show emotion, right? Like some of those aspects form parts of self. And what I mean by that, it's like, for me, I have a therapist part, right? I also have like a son part. I also have, being a brother part. And then we have all these other parts too that develop over time. Like I'm also like a TBI survivor part, right? And some of those parts form to also protect other parts that maybe were wounded when, you know, somebody said, you need to be able to suck this up, so just keep going, right? So then we might develop like a protector part for wounded parts, and then a lot of our work just becomes this like, what does that protector part need to feel supported in this moment that you can allow that wounded part to just show up?
Sure.
What would it be like to let that wounded part show up, knowing that the therapist won't invalidate that or welcome
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I would do it. But I usually take trauma therapy is a little bit slower for that reason, right? Like
Mhm.
you're not going to start opening up until you feel safe with somebody, and that takes a few sessions.
Oh yeah, yeah. For me, it took a couple months actually, and then
Everyone's
even
different.
yeah, and then even with that, it was like I would still test him a little bit, like
Mhm.
see if he was paying attention and actually remembered certain stories or, things like
Yeah.
that. And yeah, I don't know. My therapist is amazing though. I love that dude. I could just sit there and talk to him and drink coffee for an hour and just feel better.
Yeah.
Even though we've covered none of our like where do you feel this in your body? Let's focus on thing, without all
Mm.
that, like great dude. And that's gonna lead me into my next question. I have two questions for you, then I can get you out of here.
Yeah,
These
you're fine.
next two, I don't know. Kind of curious how it's going to go. So,
Let's try it.
we're talking about different modalities of
Mhm.
therapy, and one that I've particularly been interested in and done a bunch of research on, and is very big in like the special operations community with like SEALs and mariners and
Mhm.
all those guys. Is they're going down to like Colombia and Mexico and things of that nature, doing ayahuasca and
Mm.
DMT, things of that nature, psilocybin, like microdosing psilocybin and things like that. Do you feel like there's any validity to that? Does it help, or do you have any experience? First of all, I don't want to put you on the spot and
Yeah.
something I have no idea about, but
I
yeah,
don't.
okay,
I don't have experience, and that's why I don't want to give too much of an opinion on. I know the
sure,
research is coming out. I know like the VA is looking at, research right now on it. Even
yeah,
even more research is coming out in MDMA and stuff like that, right?
yep,
So I think we're kind of on one of those cliffs that in like the next few years this research is going to be showing whether it works or it's not, or it works for this but it doesn't work for that,
hmm,
right? I've I've seen people try, ayahuasca, and I've seen it work for some things and I've seen it not work for some things. And, you know, I don't know. Does that mean it only works for X and doesn't work for Y? I don't know. I
yeah,
don't
sure.
not running the research trials,
Is it
but
something that you would be interested in trying?
I don't think so. And let me also explain that it's not that I don't, I mean, I could try it for like the sake of trying it,
Hmm.
right? I also feel like in my own therapy that I've had to go through, that I've also dealt with a lot of the past stuff from that car accident. And like I would be trying it just for the sake of trying it. I wouldn't be like trying it to say like, okay, I need to, integrate this memory of
Sure.
this past situation or these years of my childhood, right? So I don't know if my experience would also, I guess, yield as much benefit,
Hmm.
if
No,
does
yeah,
that make
yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, it's definitely for different people.
sense?
It's yeah, it's something that I've been interested in, just because I guess like I know it's not technically like in the DSM, but I would have like the complex version of like PTSD.
Yeah.
So it's something that I've definitely been looking into. Just always good to get professional experiences or
Hmm.
opinions on things. So that brings me to my last question. And
Sure.
this is one that I truly don't know how you do it. So just for a little bit of context, somewhere along the lines, people started looking at me as a real adult and they started thinking that I have my shit together. And my friends will reach out to me for help quite
Hmm.
often, whether it's they're going through a breakup or they need to move or
Hmm.
just talk, like I somehow have become a semi-responsible, reliable like asset to have as a friend, which
You're also
I
going to
don't,
school to be a lawyer.
yes.
So there's
Which
going to
I
be a
don't,
bar there.
yeah, that's a surprise to me as well. Um, so I hear a lot of stories.
Hmm.
Doing this podcast, I've heard a multitude of stories. I personally know a woman who has been chained to a radiator and sold for as a prostitute
Hmm.
within a trap house. When the house was raided, she was brought to jail just to figure everything out. She was released after they found out that she was actually kidnapped and tortured and forced to stay there. She was the one who got the guy out of jail, bailed him out because he had the drugs. and she needed the drugs. And
Mhm.
so hearing things like that, and that's just the first one that pops to my mind,
Mhm.
dealing with like family members, relationships, and things. All of this stuff, I feel like when you listen to it and you hear it, it's not just in one ear and out the other. It stays and it has a weight to it. Uh,
Mhm.
Other people's problems and issues kind of, not that I take them on as my own responsibility, but I do feel them as like an increased level of stress per se,
Mhm.
or like how do you, as a professional listener, essentially you're basically just a perspective shifter of trying to get other people to see things from a different perspective. But in order to do that, you have to listen to that story and really take it in to
Mhm.
see those details that they may not even know is what they're looking for.
Yeah.
What is your process of handling that and not, like coming out of a 2 hour long EMDR session with a Navy SEAL who has gone through, 17 deployments, whatever,
Mhm.
having to hear these stories and go through it and come home and not bring that home to your family or hold
Yeah.
that weight? How do you compartmentalize these things from your professional
Sure.
life to your personal life?
Sure. And when we look at also overall wellness, it's a lot of what we look at, right? Working out, activity, right? Staying busy or staying physically fit, running, eating healthy, all those pieces, adequate sleep, right? All are crucial. I think also realizing too, trauma therapy slows a lot of stuff down, right? So yeah, so if you're working with the SEAL that did 17 deployments, you're also not targeting 17 deployments in a 2 hour session,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
You're targeting small chunks,
Yeah.
slowing things down, right? Your nervous system, your regulation, and how do you re-regulate your nervous system after those components or after those sessions are crucial, right? So so what are things that I do to regulate, right? Well, I stay connected with my friends, my family, right? Hearing their voices.
Mhm.
Right? I also spend time working out or when I can, right? Um, Finding ways to just stay active. So, and right now we're pretty busy as a family, as running a business and stuff like that. So my activity levels are pretty small right now, but finding the joy and even just like shoveling snow and like how I used to do that with my dad, right? That's no longer here. Like those kinds of components where I'm like,
Mhm.
like this brings back a lot of nostalgia, right? Or the
Yeah.
smell of fresh cut grass, right?
Yeah.
Like those pieces where I'm like, that brings back something, right? Going for walks outside, listening to water running, like streams and stuff like that. All those pieces help me regulate my nervous system,
Okay.
right? Because
Yeah.
usually trauma dysregulates the nervous system, right? So if
Yeah.
you can have a regulated nervous system, then it's not bothering you.
Okay. So you just
Right?
kind of take some time out for yourself. It sounds
Cooking,
like.
yeah, cooking's a great way. I
Oh,
mean,
I'm sorry. I thought you said drinking. You're
oh
like
no, no,
drinking?
no,
Like, yeah,
cooking,
that helps
cooking,
short term.
cooking.
Yeah.
Yes. No, cooking, but like, really honing in on scents and textures as you cook, right?
Yeah.
If you're chopping onions versus if you're chopping celery, how do they
Yep.
smell, right? What do they smell differently?
Yeah. Cooking has
So,
always been a very therapeutic thing I've enjoyed. And baking, not so much. That's more of a chemistry project, but cooking
yeah.
is, yeah, I really enjoy just loud music, me in the
Mhm.
kitchen for like an hour, just leave me alone and see what happens at the end.
Yeah.
If it
I think
doesn't work out, we'll get pizza.
humor is another great way. Laughing with friends, right?
Yeah,
That's huge. Laughing is a huge sense. And I mean, to be in a humorous state, you also have to feel pretty relaxed and pretty connected with other people, which is your part of your ventral nervous system, which is where you're regulated.
sure, sure.
Very hard to laugh if you're in a trauma situation or you're dissociated.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go ahead and end on this.
Yeah.
You have an Instagram page. It's
Yep.
Revitalize Mental Health.
Yeah,
Um,
revitalize underscore mental health.
okay. Yep.
I had an old one that was that, and I can't delete it. So
Oh, okay. Um, it you put out a lot of really good information. It doesn't, it's not so much about like what you're doing through the day and trying to flex on people and what kind of car you have.
No.
It's, what types of trauma there are, what is trauma bonding, things like
Hmm.
that. And you're putting out a lot of education for free, which is extremely valuable. So I'm kind of curious as to what you have coming up next. Like what's in the future for you? You don't seem to be the type to stay still for very long. Um,
Yeah.
so what projects do you have coming up next, and,
Sure.
what's on the docket?
So hoping to, in the next year or so, leave my full-time job. So that'll be exciting. And then I'm gonna start a TBI recovery podcast. So that'll be exciting,
Nice.
to jump into and lean into, but also, growing the practice. There's a right now I'm private pay, and which is great, but getting into a place where we can also do some, maybe start a little nonprofit off the side for people who are on Medicaid, so we can really make sure that we're supporting
Hmm.
all aspect or all spectrums on the population. So yeah, I mean there's you're always pushing the limits, right? Like it doesn't stop.
Yeah, yeah. And the great thing about podcasting is you will get downloads. Having
Hmm.
something like, it's actually kind of weird when you get into podcasting. Like with my show, it's kind of broad. You're not 100% sure what you're going to get. But if you're labeling it as like a TBI podcast, it's going to be very easy for people to search, and they're going to know exactly what they're going to be getting. And with someone like you that has not only the experience but the formal education, along with the
Hmm.
practice of theory through different like therapeutic modalities, is that's going to be a hit, man. It's definitely
Yeah,
something that I'm looking forward to now. I'm definitely going to have to check in with you in a couple months and see how that's
for
going.
sure. For
You-
sure.
Have you thought about when you were planning on starting it at all?
I don't. I mean, it's it's still, depends if I leave my job at the end of this year or if I stay for another year or not, you know.
Sure.
So, and right now with just how the business is, we come up with 2 or 3 blog posts a month around mental health, awareness, recovery, signs and symptoms of depression, whatever it is, right? So,
Yeah, yeah,
all that stuff takes bandwidth. And right now, I just need to focus on what I need to focus on as well as where my values are so that I can give that adequate time.
yeah. That's amazing. You just said something that I feel like more people should utilize in their vocabulary, was the term of bandwidth, and
Mhm.
in just how much you have. That's a new term for me as well. And but I feel like I read this the other day that if you wake up and you only have 40% that day, but you give 40%, you gave 100%. And
Mhm.
that was kind of cool to hear, along with what we were just talking about. So I'm not sure how
Mhm.
those connected, but
All right.
I've really enjoyed our conversation. Where are you located? So if my listeners are local and they would like to reach out for some help or send you a
Mhm.
DM and try to get try to get more information, how can they contact you in
Yep.
online, social media, and in
Sure.
Colorado?
Sure. So, I mean, they can give me a call, 720-295-6703. But the website is revitalizementalhealth.com. So they can send a message there, find me online, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, DM me. My license right now only pertains to Colorado. So if you're in Colorado, I could work with you if that's what you want. But even if you're not outside, but you're like, hey, I just have a couple of questions around, how could I go about finding somebody that is going to be a good fit, or
Yeah.
start like what are good questions to ask a therapist? Like I can DM somebody, and I'm happy to support people that aren't outside too, so or
Yeah.
that aren't inside Colorado.
Yeah. No, that's why I love this show so much, is just everybody has their own different story. And so
Hmm.
just having a collection of a magnitude of people to be able to where you can just go and get frames of reference to where if you're not the correct person, you can point them in the correct direction,
Exactly.
which
Exactly.
is amazing. And I will link everything in the show notes below this for YouTube, Spotify, Apple, everything. And yeah, maybe we can get you some more clients out there in Colorado, and
Love it.
definitely 100% looking forward to the TBI podcast. So let me know when that comes out. And other than that, it's been an honor. I genuinely appreciate you taking time out of your day to speak with me, to provide value, and hopefully I wasn't too boring for you.
Oh, you too.
But
You too. Thank you so much, Rob.
yeah,
This is a great area for people to go, especially because it recovery, again, whatever kind of thing you're trying to
yep,
recover from. This isn't a straight shot. You're gonna
yeah,
run into shit.
yeah. It seems like it all boils down to, do you want it? Are you
Mhm.
willing to put in the work, and are you disciplined enough to continue doing it?
Mhm.
Seems like what it all comes down to, but
Yeah.
everybody's different, so who knows?
True.
Yeah, I want to thank you again, Daniel, for coming on. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, hearing your story, coming from a gutter in a car to now owning your own private practice. It's an amazing story, and definitely going to keep checking in on you and see how
Yeah.
things progress. Looking forward to it, and yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it too.
All right, have a good one.
You too.